for anybody joining us today, my name is Jasmine. I'm going live from Fostering Connections. So we are Victoria's statewide recruitment and information service. We call on the community to open their hearts and homes to children and young people in need. We know that it takes a village to raise children, so in this video hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions you might have about becoming a part of that village and caring for children who are unable to live at home with their families for different reasons. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which we're streaming today, the Wurundjeri people. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend those respects to all Indigenous Australians who might be joining us today. We also acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So who are Fostering Connections? That's always a good place to start. So as I said, we are Victoria's statewide recruitment service to provide information for people wanting to become foster carers, to answer any questions that you might have and to help you understand if foster care is right for you. If you do decide to take that next step, we can put you in touch with a foster care agency in your area and help you get started on that process. So anyone can call Fostering Connections at any time or visit our website to receive information about foster care. And if you do call through our inquiry line, which the number is this way, just behind me here, 1800 013 088. If you do ring through to our inquiry line, it's likely that you'll speak to myself. So whether you're at the start of your foster care journey and full of questions, or if you're ready to be referred to an agency and start that process, we're here to help. So if you do call through to our inquiry line, as I said, it will be me most likely that you'll speak to. So I've worked in the foster care recruitment space for almost 4 years now, working directly with prospective and accredited foster carers. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have today in the chat, or as I said, if you'd like to have a conversation about your personal circumstances, then you can always call through to the number behind me. Yesterday was Ida Hobbit, but today we're going to focus on LGBTIQ+ foster carers and children in care, and have a little bit of a discussion about caring for those children, or if you are part of an LGBTIQ+ couple, answering any questions you might have about how that might affect your accreditation process. So we might start there to just say that if you are in a same-sex couple, or if you are single, whether you're married or in any other type of relationship style, you are eligible to be a foster carer. There are no qualifying factors in terms of your relationship status in that way. And sometimes we find that certain household dynamics can be more suitable to certain children. So that can help with placement matching and making sure that the household is going to be the right fit for that child to enable them to feel safe and to thrive in that environment. So what is foster care? That's usually a good place to start. So foster care is the temporary care of children and young people by members of the community who've been appropriately trained and checked out to be accredited as foster carers. So as part of your assessment process, you'll start with some initial conversations. We'll get to know you. We'll give you some information about what's involved in foster care and what's required from you. Then you do some training, and that training will cover all of the basics of foster care. It's really a foundational training opportunity, and also provides an opportunity again to ask any questions and to clarify what that might look like for your personal circumstances. After your training, if you'd like to proceed, then we'll continue on with that process and you'll move into the assessment stage. So they'll start to do things like your home and environment check, making sure everything's safe and secure around your home environment. They'll also get you to do a health check, make sure you're fit and healthy both mentally and physically. And then they'll also do some other paperwork, so things like a police check and a working with children check, and get you to fill out some forms. So the assessment itself is usually a couple of interviews in your home, between 4 and 8 interviews that can take up to 2 hours each. And if you've got your own children, we will speak to them on their own as well to make sure that they understand what fostering is all about, because we don't want to disrupt your family unit either. So we've just popped a comment in the chat, so if you are interested in finding out more about foster care and if it's right for you, you can jump onto our website, which is fosteringconnections.com.au, or give us a call on 1800 013 088. So if you do check out the website, there's plenty of stories on there about different foster care households, what that looks like for people with different circumstances, and some other stories on there as well as information relating to that assessment process that I've just sort of covered in a nutshell. So people often ask questions around, how long do foster care placements last, or what's the sort of commitment that you have to make? And the answer to that is it really depends on your lifestyle and what you are able to offer. So there are 4 sort of main types of foster care that we look at, and those include short and long-term care, where a child might come and stay with you for a couple of months or up to a couple of years. Then there's respite and emergency care. So respite care is usually planned as a bit of a break for foster carers or for kinship carers who might have care of a relative or a child that they know. It's usually for perhaps 1 weekend a month or over school holidays, so you can really fit that into your lifestyle as well if you choose to go for respite care. And then emergency care, as I also mentioned, is usually it's fairly immediate care, up to a couple of weeks at a time, but again, you can specify that length of time that you're comfortable with committing to. So whether that's a night here or there, a weekend, or a couple of nights, up to a couple of months or a couple of years. So again, if you are interested in learning about the different types of foster care, we've just popped another link in the chat to explain the differences between those. Now you can choose to be open to all of those different types of care, or just 1 or 2, or even just 1. And you can also choose the age range of children you'd like to care for. So oftentimes people might say primary school age or high school age or younger, and you can also choose the gender and the number of children that you're comfortable caring for at once. So wherever possible, we'll try to keep sibling groups together, but we do understand that might not always be possible for our foster families. Sometimes you might only have space for 1 spare bed, and that's definitely okay as well. So as part of your assessment process, they'll look at all of the different types of care, and if your agency has any specific recommendations about what might suit your lifestyle best, they will let you know what that looks like as well. As I mentioned, your family structure definitely does not determine or qualify you in any way as a foster carer. We have plenty of foster carers who are single, in same-sex relationships, married, with children, without. Plenty of people choose to become foster carers after they reach retirement age and life's starting to settle down a little bit for them, when their own children have left the home and things like that. So that's always an option too. If now's not the right time for you, you can always look at it when your lifestyle is going to fit with meeting the needs of children in foster care. One of the requirements of becoming a foster carer is being open to supporting a child to explore their own identity and making sure that stays true to who they are. So that does include things like family contact and making sure they stay connected to their birth families and birth communities, and also helping them to understand and process things like their gender identity and their sexual expression if they are that little bit older as well. So really important to note that that's an important part of the accreditation process, and if that's something that you don't know a lot about or that you're not comfortable with at this stage, there's lots and lots of training available to foster carers to help explore those different aspects as well. If you do have any questions that I can answer for you today, definitely pop them in the chat. But I'm going to go through some of the myths or some of the frequently asked questions that we get that come through our inquiry line as well. So people often ask, can I become a foster carer if I work full-time or part-time or casually? And the answer to that is absolutely. Most people these days do need to work to be able to maintain their lifestyles, but some of our children might need a full-time stay-at-home carer. So this might include babies or children under 5, where the preference would be for them to have sort of one attachment figure in their life, and it also helps to maintain that contact with their birth families as well, particularly if the plan is for them to be returned to their birth families. Excuse me. What's required of you as foster carers if you do work full-time is just being open and honest with your foster care agency about the type of care that's suited to your circumstances and work commitments. And as I said, if that changes over time, you can always chat to your agency about what that might look like. So If you've signed up for long-term care because you're not working and you're able to be at home, but down the track you decide to re-enter the workforce, that's absolutely possible. It's just about having that conversation with your agency and making sure that everybody's across your circumstances and your other commitments. As I said, people often ask about, relationship status in terms of being in a relationship, if it's required for you to be in a relationship to be a foster carer. Of course, having an extra adult in the home, an extra support person, can be helpful, but foster carers can be married, single, or in de facto partnerships. You can be any sexuality, any gender, or any gender identity, because we do need a range of carers from all different backgrounds with a range of different household types to support children and young people in out-of-home care. So if you are a single person, we'll look especially closely at your support network. Make sure that you've got good connections within the community, within your family and friend relationships, to make sure that if you do need that extra bit of support, you're not going to be left without the support that you need. Of course, your agency will also provide you with a lot of additional support. And what that looks like is regular contact with an assigned caseworker. So you'll have one point of contact within your agency that can answer any questions, help brainstorm with strategies, and to also report anything that you might need to report with regards to your foster care placement. Your foster care agency will also provide a lot of training and support activities, so that includes social events that you can attend to meet other foster carers and connect with them about their experiences as well. And other opportunities for you to debrief and to meet with people who are experiencing similar challenges and experiences to what you are. Excuse me. Your foster care agencies also have 24-hour on-call support. So what that looks like is there's always someone on the other end of the line that can help with troubleshooting things, whether it's 2 a.m, whether it's Saturday afternoon, or whether it's during the day, that 9 to 5, where you can be in contact with your assigned social worker as well. Speaking of support, people often ask, if you need parenting experience or if you can do this without having had your own children, and the answer is absolutely yes. So if you don't have experience caring for children, then your agency again will be able to sort of support you and to give you strategies that you might need. But really important to note that some of the techniques and the strategies that we use with children who've experienced significant trauma, they are different to how we would parent a child who has that safe and stable base already. So it is great to have parenting experience, and of course that will help you out a lot, but it's not a requirement. So if you're able to provide stability and support, then you absolutely are a suitable candidate for foster care. On that note, if you do have children in your own home already, your own kids, you might look at, how you'll be able to support a child in terms of things like school runs, making sure you've got enough time to meet all of the emotional needs of the children in your household, and making sure that your kids are comfortable with things like sharing their toys and their space with another child as well. Children and young people in home-based or foster care do have complex needs, and they do require that extra bit of time and attention, which does mean that some placements might not be appropriate with other children in your home, particularly little ones. But in saying that, many children and young people in foster care will benefit from having other children in the home. They can socialise with them, they can develop their own skills as well, and it can provide an extra sort of strong relationship in the household as well, which is always beneficial. So again, if you're not sure about whether your children will be comfortable with foster caring in your home, you can call Fostering Connections or a foster care agency directly, and we can have a chat about what your children's needs are and how that might work for you. So really happy to answer any questions specifically relating to children in your care already, and there's obviously no commitment at that point. Sometimes people call us on the inquiry line asking about whether foster care and adoption are the same thing. So the short answer is no. Foster care is wherever possible temporary. It's not designed to be a permanent placement. Adoption, on the other hand, is where you become the permanent legal guardian of a child or young person, whereas with foster care you are caring for that child or young person for sort of a fixed period, with the common goal of everyone involved to reunite that child with their family, with their birth family or community wherever possible. And in foster care, it's important to note that the child's legal guardian is defined by court orders and is often the department or birth family. So there is a bit of a difference in terms of decisions that you can make in regards to that child or young person. In saying that, people often ask, do you have to commit to a child long term or for years at a time? And of course, if that is something that you're open to, knowing that foster care is supposed to be temporary wherever suitable, excuse me, as I mentioned, you do not have to commit to permanent or long-term care for years at a time if that's not something that's going to fit in with your personal circumstances or your household structure at the time. Of course, if a child is placed with you for a couple of weeks or a couple of nights, and it is determined that they do need to stay a bit longer in foster care, your agency will approach you and have a chat to you about whether you'd be comfortable with keeping that child in your care for longer. And this helps to make sure that that children are not moving between too many homes wherever possible and breaking those attachments. People often ask about the challenging behaviours or emotional challenges that children and young people in foster care might experience. And of course, children and young people in foster care have likely had child protection involvement. So it is likely that they have experienced challenges in the home that they were living in, but they are just like other children. So it's really critical that you approach foster care with an open heart and a willingness to sort of understand that child's needs and where they're coming from. Your role as a foster carer is to show support and boundaries and to help guide children through different stages and challenges. And so with persistent and consistent care, it is possible to sort of reduce some of those challenges as they're faced in the home. So as a child gets to know you better and starts to feel safe and comfortable in your home, we do see some of those challenging behaviours and emotions sort of lessen over time. Again, your agency will provide you with lots and lots of support on this. So if there are particular issues that you're finding challenging, there's always training available or people you can talk to in order to understand how to best meet that child's needs. I've just had a question come through from Sarah asking about how long that process usually takes from initial inquiry to being approved as a carer. That's a really good question, Sarah. Usually we say to allow about 6 months. The process can be completed in less time than that, so usually a minimum of 3 months. But it does depend a lot on your motivation and how quickly you are able to sort of respond to different parts of that process. So if you're someone who's quite busy, has a lot going on, works a lot, you might find it harder to get into training on those set dates when the groups are set up, or it might take you a little bit longer to complete some of the paperwork, for example, the health check and visiting your GP, and so that can make that time take a little bit longer. And of course, in some circumstances, there might be areas where your assessor might need to explore things in a little bit more depth. So particularly if you've got anything in your personal history that might need to be explored a little bit more, that can make that process take a little bit longer. So it's especially designed to take a bit of time to get through, and that's to help really make sure that you are motivated and not just signing up on a whim to help out a little person. We want to make sure that our carers are really, really committed to foster care before they are accredited, so that you have all of the tools and the knowledge that you need before you get started with your first placement. So I hope that answers your question, Sarah. Feel free to pop any others that you have into the chat and I'll get to those as well. Moving away from that accreditation process again, people often ask, when you do get that call about taking on a placement, how much information will you get about the child that's coming into your care? So foster carers can always ask for information about a child or young person that will help to prepare you for a placement before that happens. So examples of that might be their medical needs, their routine, any behavioural needs, or perhaps a placement history, so if they've been in foster care before, what that's looked like. And you'll also be told about family details and contact arrangements, and also how to best support that child culturally as well. So if they are a child who is First Nations child or Indigenous child, or if they come from a different cultural background to you, then your agency will let you know what you need to do to help keep them connected to that culture and help learn about where they come from and their personal histories as well. As I said, you can absolutely choose the age of children that you would like to care for, and what that might look like is, as I said earlier, it might be a range of ages, it might be a little bit more specific, so you might choose to care for infants who are newborn to 2 years old, for example. You might choose primary school age, or you might be open to 0 to 18, any child within that range. It is okay to set those preferences. Sometimes people feel a bit uncomfortable about naming sort of what would meet their needs, but that's okay. We want our foster carers to understand how fostering is going to affect you and your lifestyle, and to make sure you understand, where your own limitations and boundaries are as well. Of course, if there is a child who perhaps has siblings who might be outside your age range, you might be approached about that. Or if there's a child who has specific needs that would be best suited to your household, then they might approach you for that as well, if it is outside of your age range as well. So for example, if the child went to a school that was local to your house, or if you had experience perhaps caring for children with disabilities, and a child with disabilities was referred to your agency, then they might look at you as a placement for that child as well. Can you say no when you get called up for a placement? That's often something that people ask, and the answer is absolutely. So sometimes, life is a bit chaotic. You might have extra work commitments or things going on in your household. COVID has definitely been a big factor in that as well. So you can always say no if it's not the right time or not the right fit for you. And you can do that by asking questions about that particular child before you say yes, but also communicating with your agency if your circumstances change. So if you do need to, you can always say to your agency that you need to take a little bit of a break. For example, if you've got a child who might be going through VCE exams, or as I said, you've got additional work commitments, or there are other things going on in your household, you can always ask, not to take any placements during that time as well. You might also choose not to take any placements if you've already got one in your care, just to make sure that you're focusing your energy and time commitments into that child that you've got already. So that's definitely an option as well. People often ask about, their visa status. So it's not essential for people in Victoria to be Australian citizens, but what is required is to demonstrate some level of permanency. So it's important that if you are a non-Australian citizen, to know that you may only be able to provide emergency or respite care, so again those shorter periods of time, rather than committing to a long-term placement in case you do need to leave the country. In some cases, non-Australian citizens or permanent residents may be considered to take on longer-term care of a child if it's in the best interest of that child or young person. So, for example, if you do intend to stay from Australia and you are from the same cultural background as the child who's requiring care, then they might look at placing that child with you long-term in some circumstances. If anybody has any other questions, don't forget to pop them in the chat because I'm happy to answer them, but otherwise I'll keep going through some of our more frequently asked questions, and hopefully that will give you guys some of the answers that you need. I mentioned before about family contact and keeping children connected to their birth families and communities. So children in foster care do absolutely have family contact, and that contact plan is usually determined by the children's court. So the child or young person's safety is always the priority, so each situation is assessed individually. And as I said, the majority of children will have family contact unless there's a good reason not to. So that might be supervised contact, it might be unsupervised, and it could be for different lengths of time as well. But it's a really important way to keep them in touch with their culture, their family and their community as well. For Aboriginal children, it's especially important to ensure they have contact with their families and communities, especially when they're placed with non-Indigenous carers. This helps them to maintain connection to that family and community, and to foster that sense of belonging and development in their cultural identity as well. So if you do take on care of an Aboriginal child, they will have a cultural care plan as well, and it will make sure that that plan also ensures that you have access to everything you might need to help maintain those ties for that child in that foster care placement. Claire, I can see you've asked a question in the chat about how long placements last. So this is what I was mentioning earlier about the type of care that you sign up for. Excuse me. So it really does depend. So you can sign up to care for children for just a couple of nights at a time, for a couple of weeks, for a couple of months, or into that long-term or more permanency, if that's what's required for that child. So it really is determined by what your level of commitment is and how much you're able to do. But as the child's case goes back to court, your agency will have a chat to you about what the plans are for that child. So as I said, if you've signed up for just emergency care for a couple of nights here or there and it goes back to court, then they might approach you about taking that care on long term if that child's going to stay in foster care. But as I said, you can always say no, and you can always set your own limits about what might suit you. So as I said, there might be times where you're able to commit to a bit longer, and that's something that you can always discuss with your agency. So it really is about having that open and honest communication with your agency about what your capacity is and what you're able to provide as well. So Bronwyn's just put a little bit of another link into the chat about the different types of foster care as well. So have a read of that, and that might help you to understand which type of foster care. So as I said earlier, that respite care, emergency care, short-term care, or long-term care, and you can sign up for all of those, or just a couple, or just one, depending on what's going to meet your needs. So your question about whether children stay permanently with carers is a really interesting one. So with foster care, almost always the goal is to keep it temporary and to reunify children with their families and their communities. So the goal of foster care is not permanent care, but you can absolutely, in some circumstances, it will lead to that. So in some instances, it will be determined that children are unable to go home to live with their birth families, in which case a long-term care order or a permanent care order might be sought for that child. And in that case, then they very well might have that conversation with the foster carers. But it's just important to note that if your goal is to add to your family permanently, then foster care might not be the right option for you. But ultimately, it does happen that sometimes children do stay permanently in foster care placements. So I hope that helps. If you do have any other questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'm really happy to answer them for you. When people call up, they often ask questions about, if they potentially have a police record and if that might affect their eligibility to become a foster carer. As I mentioned earlier, all foster carers in Victoria are required to have a police check and a working with children check as part of that accreditation process. So some offences will rule you out from being a foster carer. So offences like sexual and physical abuse, particularly towards a child, will rule you out from accreditation, while other offences may not. So some more minor offences may not affect your eligibility, but it's really important that you're open and discuss any criminal history that you might have with your agency up front. So have that conversation with your agency early on. They might choose to do a police check earlier than usual and ask you some questions about what that looks like for you, but they're very open to having that conversation, and it doesn't rule you out in every case. People often ask about financial reimbursement as a foster carer. So there is a small care allowance as well involved in foster caring. It's not a payment for being a carer, and it's not paid on sort of a retainer basis, so it's not consistent, but it is intended to contribute to the day-to-day expenses incurred in the provision of care. So things like food, clothing, personal items, transport, pocket money and entertainment. It is a care allowance, not an income, so it's tax-free, and it is provided through the Department of Families, Fairness and Housing. So in general, payments start at about $400 a fortnight, paid pro rata on a nightly basis. So that can give you a bit of an indication of how that might help to meet the financial needs of caring for a child. It does increase depending on the age of the child or young person and with the complexity of their needs. So if they have a lot of doctor's appointments and things like that, then that might increase the complexity of their needs as well. It might sound hard to calculate that and to work out what that payment might be, but your agency will provide extra guidance and support when it comes to understanding that care allowance, and also any other financial support in terms of reimbursements for larger items and things like that as well. People often ask about sort of support with daily routines like school pickup, or can children in foster care attend childcare? What we usually say is that carers are responsible for meeting sort of the needs of the foster child, daily activities. So things like transport to and from school, and the regular runaround of caring for a child. But in saying that, you are not alone. So if there's an emergency or something unexpected pops up, your agency will be quite active in offering extra support. And older children or teenagers might be a little bit more independent, so they can take public transport or walk to school unaccompanied. And your agency might also have additional resources to organise transport for a particular child. So if you do need specific childcare arrangements, so for example, if you work full-time and aren't able to be at home during the day, then that's absolutely fine. So specific childcare arrangements will depend on the needs of the child, but all carers are eligible for the childcare rebate, and some carers might be eligible for the childcare benefit as well. So after you've applied for any of those rebates, then the department will pay the gap to cover additional childcare expenses, but your agency will chat to you about what that looks like, and you can always ask that question very early on. So before you say yes to taking on a placement, you can ask about whether that child can attend childcare or after school care arrangements or things like that, or if they're a little bit older and are a bit more independent, then that might suit your needs a little bit better as well if you are working a 9-to-5 sort of commitment and aren't able to do that pick up and drop off. Can you change your mind about the types of care that you provide? Absolutely. So you're not expected to know what type of care that you're, signing up for forever. From the moment that you inquire. So part of the reason that accreditation process does take a couple of months is to help you really explore the options that are available to you and to work out what's going to best fit in with your needs and your lifestyle as well. So you can always change that care type afterwards. You might find out that it's not working for you to have long-term care, or after a couple of respite placements you might decide that you would like to commit to a more long-term stable arrangement, and so you can chat to your agency about that as well. Fostering is very, very flexible and depends on your capacity, so you can always change your accreditation from respite to long-term or vice versa to best be able to support the children in your care. People often ask, if they're single and they do take on, start a new relationship or re-partner, what happens? So anyone who is an adult in your home that is likely to have sort of caring responsibilities for that child in foster care, they will need to be accredited as a foster carer as well. So that process is a little bit different if they're a new partner coming into the home of an already accredited foster carer, but your agency will discuss what that looks like for you. So they'll definitely need to redo or to do that training that I mentioned earlier, so they've got an understanding of where children come from and what their needs are in foster care, and to also understand some of the legal requirements around foster children in care as well. On that note, if you do have other people living in your household, so if there are other people in your home over the age of 18, they must also do that training to become a foster carer. So if you've got adult children living in your home, they don't have to become registered as foster carers, but they will at least need to attend the foster care training and to have a valid working with children check and a police check done as well. So that's for all members of the household who are over 18. If there are people in your support network that you would like to help care for the child that's in your care, that's a really natural part of any caring arrangement, whether you're parents or foster carers, is to have someone like an auntie or an uncle or a grandparent to provide babysitting every so often and things like that. So everyone who's likely to care for the child in your care unsupervised, again, they'll just need to have that working with children check and police check, and sort of be known to your agency as well. So you just need to let them know what those care arrangements might be, or any adults that might be coming in and out of your home as well. So they'll explore that throughout that accreditation process. But it's a really good idea to have a think about who your village is. So it takes a village to raise a child. So having a think about what that village looks like in terms of your household, to understand who might need to have those checks, and have a chat to them pretty early on, to make sure that they're on board as well. Does anybody have any other questions that they'd like to pop in the chat? Nothing's coming through yet, so I'll go through a few more of the frequently asked questions that we do get. So as I mentioned before, there's lots of different supports available, and it does depend on your circumstances and things like that. And the support is sort of tailored to you as a foster carer. So some foster carers need to have a lot of contact with their caseworker to debrief about things. Some prefer to just have a quick check-in. As part of your foster carer sort of requirements, you will be required to have supervision with your case manager every month. And the foster care agency is also required to see the child in your care at least once a month as well, without you present. So your agency will walk you through what that looks like for each child and circumstance, but they will let you know what those requirements are. People often ask, do you have to do all of the training in the accreditation process if you've worked in this field, or you've been a social worker or a teacher or a police officer? The answer is absolutely yes. There are some roles that exist where having that experience would exclude you from needing a working with children check or things like that. In foster care, you absolutely still need to have a working with children check and police check. And every foster carer in Victoria does need to complete the shared lives training. It's a mandatory requirement, regardless of what your experience is. But bringing that experience into your foster care journey will enrich your understanding of how to support children and young people in care, the types of challenges that they might have faced, and the different aspects involved in caring for vulnerable children. So it's definitely an asset. And if you do have that extra bit of experience, your agency might talk to you about more specialised types of foster care, such as therapeutic foster care, or different programs that they might offer to provide a little bit of extra support for children with that additional complexity as well. So one example of that might be if you're a nurse and there is a child who needs specific feeding or has different requirements relating to that, then they might have a chat to you about what that will look like. People often ask how expensive it is to become a foster carer. There shouldn't be any costs associated with becoming registered as a foster carer, with the exception of visiting your GP if you visit a non-bulk billing doctor. So it shouldn't cost you any money. The working with children check that you obtain is a voluntary working with children check, because the role of foster care is still determined to be a voluntary position. And one of the last frequently asked sort of questions I get is, can you be accredited with more than one agency? And the answer to that is no, because you do need to have a really good relationship with the agency that you're working with, so that they can best keep the children in your care safe, and also so they can best support you. So you'll build a really strong relationship with the agency that you work with and the workers that you get to know along the way, and it's really important that that relationship remains strong, so that the care of children and young people is as safe and stable as it can be. So you're more than welcome to inquire with multiple agencies and have a chat to them about what they're looking for and the different support that they offer. But once you make that decision to go through the accreditation process, you do need to choose one agency. So if you're confused about, the different agencies in your area, or not sure where to get started in connecting with them, as I've mentioned earlier, you can absolutely give us a call on 1800 013 088, and we can have a chat about that together. So hopefully that answers that question for anyone who might have had it. So unless we have any more any more questions coming through the chat, I might start to wrap up. But if you are considering foster care, or if you're not sure if it would be something that would fit in with your lifestyle, then absolutely give us a call, have a chat with us, and hopefully I can answer any questions that you might have. There's no commitment. You can start asking those questions and exploring foster care before you're ready. Sometimes people call us up and decide that it's going to be another couple of years before they are able to make that commitment, and that's okay. We'd rather give you the information and the education that you need now to make sure you're fully prepared and understand what's going to be required of you. Our foster carers are an amazing part of the community, so these are people who are voluntarily stepping up to care for members of the community who, for whatever reason, can't live with their family or other members within their close network. We need foster carers absolutely more than ever, especially with the impacts of COVID-19. We're starting to see the effects of that on families and children and young people. So we are prioritising safety during the COVID-19 pandemic to make sure that it is going to be a suitable option for your household and make sure that you're being kept safe as well. We know that foster carers can make an extraordinary impact, and we know to do that you do need to be well supported. So please don't think that if you are stepping up to the plate to play a part in your community that you won't be supported or that you won't have the tools that you need to do the best job you can, because foster care is about that community, and the supports that are available are definitely there. Foster care is flexible and can work for you. So as I mentioned, you can choose the type of care that's going to be most suitable for you, the age of the children you can care for, and you can always take breaks down the track as well if there is something that pops up in your personal life, such as travel, extra work commitments, or things going on in your family. It does take a village to raise children, and foster carers are a really important part of that village within our community. So if you're interested, please give me a call on 1-800-013-088 or visit our website, which Bronwyn has kindly placed in the chat for us today. And if you do want to share this video will be made available via recording on our Facebook page and also, I believe, our YouTube channel. So if you've got a partner or a family member you'd like to share this with, please feel free to share with them, and also encourage them to give us a call, because as I said, it's a no obligation chat at the initial stages, and we're more than happy to answer those questions more personally in a private setting. So with that, I might end the live stream now, but thank you to everyone who joined, and to those of you who asked questions. I hope that that's been helpful for you. Have a nice afternoon.